It's time for Mama Bear Donita on the Mama Bear Cancer Support Radio podcast. Welcome to the Sharing Den, where we share cancer stories, products, and information to support anyone going through the journey. We will be there for you. We will be there with you. Now, welcome Mama Bear Donita.
Hi, this is Mama Bear Donita, and you are listening to the Mama Bear Cancer Support Radio podcast on Society Bites Radio, part of the Radio Ear Network family. My podcasts are also available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Miami and Fort Lauderdale Community Radio, SOB Network. And today I want to welcome back TRACY. TRACY's been on the show a couple of times because I like TRACY a lot. And she is very well spoken since we're doing this. It works out well since we're doing a 4-part series on communication, which I feel is very important for anybody, whether you're doing cancer or not doing cancer. But especially if you're doing cancer, you need to really have good communication. And today for the part 2 series, we are talking about listening to understand. And TRACY and I, the reason I continue to invite TRACY back is because I think you find that when you listen to her podcasts, her voice is so calming, and it's a very calm energy that comes with her. And in addition to being a mediator and a attorney, she also has a soul-filled side to her that sells twin flame art glass project, glass things. For example, I have a vase in memory of my mother-in-law that I got from TRACY. And then she makes, she does readings, bone readings, and I'm not pronouncing the word because I can't, but I'll let TRACY say it for me. And anyway, TRACY's just a great person. And I think a lot to be learned from her, and she's taught me a lot. So I wanted to share her with you guys, and we're going to share her a couple more times. So with that huge introduction, welcome, TRACY.
Thank you.
I
love being here.
Yes, it's enjoyable, and I was actually telling my husband today. I said the topic is communication, listening to understand, and I had a very hard conversation with my son last night, and he was not listening to me. And I finally said, I need you to listen to what I'm saying. I need you to understand what I'm saying. And it was funny. I don't know if I said that because I had just typed up, our sheets and everything. Yeah. But I thought that this conversation today would help. So in the last time we talked about the arc of distortion. And can you help me out? Well, can we get into that a little bit further?
Sure. And the arc of distortion usually has kind of a visual that goes with it. And it looks like, there's a person standing on the left, and there's, the little point at the person's mouth, and then an arc comes off of that person. And that's what the distortion is in a visual sense. But it is the person that or the information that we're trying to get across to the other person isn't always what we mean to say. They're not always hearing what we're meaning. And when we're conversing with someone, especially when we're in conflict with that person and emotions are high, we each actually have 3 conversations going in our heads at that particular time. So think of this as 6 conversations, because you're yourself and the other person, and what's in your head is the information that you're trying to impart to the person, processing what that person is saying to us, and also when you're in a heated moment, handling the emotions that might be brought up by that conversation, and then developing in your head what to say next. So you are trying, you've got all that stuff going on in your brain while you're trying to talk, and that other person's got that stuff going on in their brain while they're trying to talk, and sometimes something gets lost in the translation, and this distortion that in the arc is due to the internal and external clutter that happens. And again, if you're in a place where you're having trouble hearing, or if you're on that other person's turf, so to speak, say that you've been called into your boss's office to hear a difficult conversation, and there's all the emotions that go along with that, which, can sometimes go straight into childhood when you're called to the principal's office or called to your dad's den or whatever to hear whatever discipline is about to happen. And all of it is distorted by all that baggage that we bring into our conversations.
And a little bit of unmanaged expectations too, like just like, I've noticed that with sometimes speaking to people, it is literally like you are talking a different language. Like
Yes, for
the things
sure.
out of your mouth are not English, or what I speak
Right.
English primarily. So, like, and how is that? Like, why is that happen?
Well, it's interesting that that I came up with this question sort of because we have some real life sort of silly concrete examples of that. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and when I went to the grocery store with my mom and growing up, we always called green bell peppers mangoes. That's what they were called. If you go to the store and there's a sign next to them, it says mango. And I mean, I grew up my whole life thinking that these green peppers were the name for that fruit is mango. And then when I went to college and and I said something about, because I happen to be allergic to bell peppers. So when I said to the food service people, I'm allergic to mangoes, and they kind of looked at me funny, like, well, we don't serve mangoes here. What are you
Right.
talking? They're like too expensive for college. And my friends were like, what are you talking about mangoes? And I said, those green things that they put into salads. And they said, no, those are bell peppers or green peppers. And it was just this huge cognitive dissonance of how can you even think that that is called something that it's not? It was just
right.
like,
how do you not know that's not a mango?
Exactly.
Let me show you a mango.
Like a rose by any other name, if you call it a skunk, it's still going to be a rose. But it was just very confusing. And that's sort of on a funny, concrete level, the illustrating sort of how these misunderstandings could happen. Because if I think that a mango or a green pepper is a mango, then how are we going to agree on things like values? And if we're talking about peace can mean different things to different people, or integrity, or anything that has to do anything with politics or equality. Those kinds of things mean different things to different people based on your background, your culture, your upbringing, where you were, where you lived, or life experience. So we assume that. I don't know if you watched the Muppet Show way back when. I used to watch it with my kids, and there's Sam the Eagle was, the all-American guy, and he would say, if you think like I do, and I know you do, and that was just sort of that running gag of we all think that everybody thinks the way we do, and we all think that if somebody looks at a bell pepper, they think it's a bell pepper and not a mango. But it's not necessarily true. We all speak English, but English means different things to different people depending on all of those other factors.
Right. Oh, no. And you really see it in highly diverse places like South Florida or like down the border, and growing up in El Paso and things like that. Everything had multiple names. And it doesn't just happen in English, because when I lived, Spanish was my first, I was born in South America. Bolivian Spanish was my first Spanish. And then we moved to Texas, and then it was a border Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned that two regional Spanishes are different, just like regional Englishes are different.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very true. And you do maybe take a second to pause and think, instead of make them feel bad, like hope to make you feel bad for thinking it was called a mango. I mean, you didn't know it was not called that. So, try to maybe not put people in their place, but just try to understand where they're coming from too.
Yeah, my son and my husband think that it's great fun to make fun of my
Sure.
My mother grew up calling chipmunks prairie dogs. It's just
That's funny. Your mom and I might be related. So
we don't have prairie dogs in Pennsylvania, so I don't know where she got it from. But
well, that happened to be growing up. My parents had some best friends, and their last names were the Kruczewskis, and I somehow as a little girl got your private area, the vagina word confused with Kruczewski. So I'd always be like, my Kruczewski kind of is. They were like, what? So, you can really have some funny things happen to you, and that,
sure,
and
absolutely.
yeah, but I think the point being that if you're listening to understand,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to understand that they're using a different word from their experience.
Exactly. But sometimes, when the concepts are much more amorphous, it's more difficult because you have to kind of um, ask questions. You have to probe. You have to, is this right? Is this wrong? Am I hearing it correctly? So that you're both on the same page talking about the same thing.
It's really a lot of work to communicate.
Absolutely.
I mean, like a lot of work.
You do it right.
Yeah. Right. To do it effectively. No, you can scream all day, but you're not going to get anything done. But yeah, no. And every time that I actually take the time to go through the things that you've taught me and I've heard from you and we're all learning from you, it actually works so much better. But it's just not my go-to, and I need to reset that. I need to go in and reset, my verbiage when people are talking. My biggest problem is paying attention sometimes. My mind goes into so many different things, and then I'm like, I only hear the last couple words of what the person said, and then I probably misheard it, and then I respond to that, and then it's a bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I be an unbiased listener?
It's interesting because in mediation training, we are taught almost by day one that the most important thing for a mediator is to manage your biases and control your biases. Most of our misunderstandings come from seeing the person as other, in quotation marks, and seeing our differences as being larger than our common purpose. So you can never get rid of your biases. You can't. They're ingrained in your upbringing, your personality. There's kind of those permanent channels in your brain that are formed when you were very young and hearing about different concepts. But you can recognize them. And we went actually through a couple of weeks in our training just trying to figure out what our biases are. And I still catch myself, and I know from experience what my trigger points are. If somebody comes in and is acting a certain way or looks a certain way or, and has that, you get your hackles up right away and you don't know why, and these are things that you bring with you. But we tend to make snap judgments about people. And it's kind of a brain defense mechanism because we put our experiences into play when we see people to make us safe. It's called, it's really a false safety. But if you see someone that you've had a bad experience with in the past, you're going to try to avoid that person. But in conversation, you can't always do that. Sometimes you just have to have a conversation with somebody, whether you like it or not. And that's where you have to notice your biases. And when you're making that gut reaction, that knee-jerk reaction, say, is this my bias speaking, or is this something that I really need to pay closer attention to and get more information about in this conversation, because it's not going to go away. The feeling isn't going to go away.
And what I want to add to that and take it in a completely different direction is that if you're an empath, you really have to factor that in.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can actually see the real feelings. And so whatever words are coming out of their mouth. So this is so weird and I can't control it. Mm-hmm. But when people speak, I see color. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody's telling me, oh, you look so nice, but red is coming out of their mouth, I'm like, mm-hmm. So it's.
What do you really mean?
Yeah. Like, I'm sorry, but and then I've learned that you can't call people out on that because they're like, first of all, you're crazy. And the fact that I can't prove that I do that makes me quote unquote crazy. And then, so, how do you like, if you're an empath and you actually know what the person is actually really feeling, it's a little bit of an advantage, yet slight disadvantage at the same time. So if you do have that skill set, what is the best way? Do you still lay down those bias, like try to realize that the biasms that come with it, or what would, I kind of might be catching off guard with this question.
No. Because I am an empath as well, as you know, and it's, what I try to do is just kind of like file it away, because if you call a person on their, I won't say dishonesty because that sounds very cruel, because there are some reasons sometimes why people say things that they